It had been 2 weeks since Andrew Mitchell was released from the state county jail after serving 4 years. Frankly speaking, he got his sentence due to a foolish mistake. Having grown up at an orphanage, he found himself captivated by life on the streets and agreed to take part in robbing a grocery store. As fate would have it, Andrew didn't even have time to enter the ill-fated building when the alarm went off, and the police arrived immediately. He couldn't escape, as the law enforcement agents had cordoned off the crime scene swiftly, blocking all the escape routes. Having ended up in jail, Andrew didn't see freedom for 4 long years. In those 4 years, not a day went by that he didn't regret his actions. In prison, Andrew refrained from joining any criminal communities, which guaranteed him an early release. However, upon his release, Andrew found himself facing a harsh reality. Unfortunately, society's attitude towards ex-convicts was far from welcoming, especially evident in the job market. It would seem that a person who'd made the decision to start their life anew shouldn't have any problems doing so, but unfortunately, the reality was very different. Most employers didn't want to hire ex-convicts. They believed that people couldn't change. If a person had broken the law once, they would do it again. Thus, as soon as Andrew shared that part of his biography, he immediately got pointed to the door. Eventually, having grown tired of the endless job search and the infinite rejections, he returned to his old friend Henry. Standing at his door, Andrew couldn't find the courage to ring the doorbell. Fortunately, the door soon opened on its own, and Henry appeared in front of his old buddy. "How long are you planning on standing there? Come on in, I just made eggs and bacon for dinner," Henry said. Andrew smiled and followed the con man whom he'd known for several years now. Soon, the two friends were already sitting in the kitchen, discussing Andrew's situation. What troubled Andrew the most was a lack of work and housing. Despite Henry's understanding attitude towards his friend's problem, there was nothing he could do to help. Henry was barely making ends meet as it was, trying his best to survive in this harsh world. "I'd gladly let you stay here," Henry began. "But Mary and the kids will come home in 2 days, you know. I got 3 mouths to feed," he added, a bit embarrassed. Andrew nodded, understanding his friend's reasoning. Feeling desperate, he decided to head to the local bar and drown his sorrows in some drinks. He hadn't taken a break in a long while, so after his second round of whiskey, he hit the dance floor. He didn't really have much to lose at that point. He didn't know what to do, and thus he simply wanted to spend some time in a state where his thoughts flowed in a completely different direction. At some point, when Andrew got tired of all the dancing, he went back to the counter and ordered another round of whiskey. However, just as he reached into his pants for his wallet, someone gently grabbed his elbow. Andrew was surprised. He turned his head and saw an elderly woman looking at him with a mischievous spark in her eyes. "Is there anything I can help you with, ma'am?" he asked, barely moving his lips. The woman appeared to be at least 70 years old, so the fact that she even came to that bar seemed rather strange. The old lady smiled and replied, "The help, I believe you can. You can help me, dear. But first, let's step outside for some fresh air." Andrew shook his head in confusion, but still followed the old lady. There wasn't much point in resisting, especially considering his unfortunate situation. As he would find out later, the woman's name was Elizabeth Morgan. She had recently turned 75, and she certainly took an interest in Andrew. However, when Mrs. Morgan revealed the nature of her request, Andrew felt uneasy. "What did you say? That you want me to marry you? Are you serious? But you're almost 50 years older. What am I supposed to tell my friends? And what's in it for me?" Andrew exclaimed, still somewhat tipsy. Feeling rather sure of herself, Megan looked at him and promptly replied, "What's in it for you? Trust me, there's a lot in it for you. All I want from you is the marriage certificate and for you to move in with me. It will be a fake marriage. You can continue living your regular life, okay?" Andrew let out a tired sigh and wiped the sweat off his forehead. It was only then that he realized that there were definitely some advantages to Mrs. Morgan's proposal, specifically the prospect of having a permanent place of residence, which could help him find a job. As for living with an elderly woman, well, that wouldn't be too big of a deal. People do worse things to get by in life. All right, I'm in, ma'am. But if there's a catch, I won't let it slide. I'll file for divorce the day I learn about something fishy," Andrew concluded, extending his hand to the old woman as a sign of agreement. Mrs. Morgan nodded politely and promised that Andrew wouldn't regret his decision. That same evening, Andrew called Henry and informed him that he wouldn't be spending the night at his place since he'd already sorted out his problems and found accommodation. Elizabeth Morgan turned out to be a rather kind woman who not only spoke eloquently but also kept her word. From that point on, her relationship with Andrew was strictly friendly. They slept in separate rooms and only crossed paths in the kitchen or living room during the second half of the day. However, there was one thing that kept bugging the so-called husband, causing him a great deal of agitation. Throughout all this time, Andrew couldn't understand the motives of the hospitable old lady. Why did she need to marry a young man? What was the meaning behind it? Unfortunately, Andrew couldn't find an answer to this question despite his best efforts. As for Mrs. Morgan, she preferred to keep silent about it, hiding the motives of her actions behind locked doors. Upon learning about Andrew's marriage, his friends and acquaintances started making fun of him. They considered him a gold digger, convinced that he was trying to solve his problems at the expense of others. It's worth noting that Andrew struggled with all the ridicule and judgment he got from people. But he continued to endure the discomfort for the sake of the agreement he made with Mrs. Morgan. Moreover, after they got married, he started seeing the advantages of this unequal union. He now had a place to stay and a job, both of which he attained with the assistance of the caring old lady, who happened to have numerous connections in various establishments of the city. Nevertheless, Andrew still remained clueless about Elizabeth Morgan's past. Was she ever married? Did she live her life alone? Did she have children or grandchildren, maybe even great-grandchildren? Any personal information about the old woman was shrouded in secrecy, a mystery that no one could unveil. One day, having returned home from work a bit earlier than usual, Andrew noticed a strange folder lying on the table. Mrs. Morgan was nowhere to be seen, which meant that she must have stepped out to get groceries. She always went shopping around this time, trying to be back in time for dinner when her fake young husband returned home from work. Andrew knew that it was impolite to touch someone else's things, but on the other hand, the folder was right there on the table. So, Andrew decided to take a little peek inside. However, as soon as he saw the folder's contents, he felt uneasy. On top were the results of a medical examination conducted on Elizabeth Morgan 2 days ago. Having skimmed through them, Andrew gasped. His heart started trembling, and his face turned as pale as chalk. Andrew read the medical report over and over again, yet he couldn't believe what was written there. Elizabeth Morgan was very sick, in the terminal stage of cancer. The elderly woman got a death sentence, and Andrew understood it like no one else. However, Mrs. Morgan was skillfully masking her symptoms, leaving Andrew completely unsuspecting. But as Andrew took a closer look at the contents of the folder, he stumbled upon an even more shocking document. It turned out to be a will drawn up in favor of Andrew, Elizabeth Morgan's legal spouse. In addition to the house, she was leaving him a substantial amount of money she had in her bank account, about several $1,000,000. Andrew just stood there, unable to believe his eyes. He was so shocked that he didn't even notice when the front door opened quietly, and Mrs. Morgan came inside. Having spotted the folder in her hands and her fake husband, she understood everything without words. "So you found it, I see. It's my fault, dear. I thought I would get back before you came home. I guess I was wrong," the elderly woman said, her voice trembling. Andrew turned around and looked into his wife's eyes, asking why. "Why are you leaving everything to me?" Mrs. Morgan put the grocery bags on the floor and settled in a chair to catch her breath. "I devoted my entire life to work, Andrew. I built a career, I found my ambitions, but I was never happy. I couldn't have children, so my husband left me for someone else. I ended up alone, and it all would have been fine, but then I got sick. It changed me, you know. I looked back at my life and realized that I hadn't lived it the way I wanted. So, I decided to get married one last time, to a young man. Sure, it's a fake marriage, but still, I wanted to die a married woman. That was something I wanted to prove to myself. It's self-deception, of course, but of such a pleasant kind," Mrs. Morgan said, struggling to hold back her tears. Andrew's face turned even paler. He felt sorry for this woman who had no one in the whole wide world, not even distant relatives. The reality was that Mrs. Morgan wanted to live the last of her months with the illusion of a happy family life, and she didn't mean anything bad or inappropriate by it. Despite the fact that doctors only gave Elizabeth Morgan a few months to live, she lived for 3 more years and passed away on a quiet fall morning when the leaves had already turned yellow. Andrew was by her side throughout this time, playing the roles of both her fake husband and a caregiver. The most interesting part was that Andrew didn't do it for the money. Mrs. Morgan turned out to be a kind and gentle woman, and Andrew felt very comfortable around her. Despite the fact that 2 years had passed since the old lady's passing, Andrew still came to visit her grave every Sunday, brushing away his tears. He always brought a mourning wreath with an unchanging inscription: "To my beloved wife, from her grieving husband,